Hello, I'm Tracy with MeetRx. I'm here with another success story podcast, and we have Dr. Stephen Hussey with us. He's a chiropractor and a functional medicine practitioner. He attained both his doctorate of chiropractic and master's in human nutrition and functional medicine from the University of Western States in Portland, Oregon. He's a health coach, speaker, and author of 2 books. How are you today, Dr. Hussey?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for coming.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. Can you start out by telling me, since this is a success story and it's your journey of life, what was your life like, your health conditions and the foods that you ate before coming to a meat-based diet?
Yeah, so it's kind of a little bit of a backstory and a few steps that led me all the way to a meat-based diet. But, from a very young age, like the age of 2, my parents noticed that I was wheezing and coughing, and I eventually was diagnosed with asthma. And then from there, it was just one inflammatory condition after the other. I had terrible allergies. I had irritable bowel syndrome. I used to break out in huge chronic hives all over my body. And I eventually, at age 9, was diagnosed with autoimmune type 1 diabetes. And so my parents and I were very reliant on, Western medical system to help us manage those conditions. But as I grew up, especially in college, when I started getting into health, I realized that all they were helping me do was manage them. And so I started to realize that, the way I live my life had a direct impact on my ability to manage those issues. And, some major diet changes as far as eating more whole foods and more animal foods. It started out more of like a paleo type thing. I realized that most of those conditions went away. Aside from the type 1 diabetes, it was more collateral damage from the inflammation when I was a kid. And so I realized that, or I started to realize that, or I guess notice that the more and more animal foods I ate, and the less and less, carbohydrate foods, and then eventually even plant foods that I ate, the easier it was to control my blood sugars, which is what type 1 diabetes is all about. It's managing blood sugars. And so I had also, the fear of cardiovascular type diseases or loss of eyesight or kidney function and stuff from diabetes had been instilled in me already. So I was looking for ways to mitigate that. And I found that, eating more and more animal foods, I could mitigate those things. I could prevent those things, or at least blood work looked normal, and doctors were impressed with what they were seeing. And so eventually, at one point, I just started eating all animal foods before I even knew that there was this animal-based community out there. And it got pretty close. It was probably like 95% animal foods. And then, and I found that, so the biggest change that I noticed from when I was still eating some plants to going to eating no plants was that there was some residual inflammation that I had that went away. And that was in the form of allergies to cats, or just other various allergies that I had, and also showed up on blood work, and that my IgE antibodies had always been slightly elevated, and that went away when I started eating animal-based diet. And I also noticed that my blood sugars were easier to control, and that eventually, after about 2-3 months on an animal-based diet, I had to reduce my insulin requirements. And I think that had to do with the inflammation that went away that made me more insulin sensitive. So those were the biggest differences that I saw going from eating any plants at all, even if it was a small amount, to none at all.
Wow. So did you just kind of intuitively come to eat meat then, or did you hear about this would make you better or stronger?
Well, it was just more based on, personal trial and error, because, I'd been told by endocrinologists and doctors that type 1 diabetics are more prone to getting heart disease and damage to arteries and things like that. And so everything I'd heard for a long time was that animal foods were going to cause heart disease. And so when I started noticing that the more animal foods I ate, that it was easier to control blood sugars, and that blood work started looking better, and all those markers started coming into normal ranges, and it was easier to control those, I started thinking, well, this doesn't make sense, So then I started looking into, the research and heart disease, and I found all the stuff that, saturated fat doesn't cause heart disease, and all the, misinformation about that stuff. And so that confirmed that for me. So then I was like, okay, it's okay to eat animal foods. I'm just going to eat more and more because they seem to help me control these things. And so I did, and it got really close to 100%, like 95% animal foods. And then that's when I stumbled upon, a community like this, and I was like, oh, you can do 100%. And I was like, let's just try it. And so I did, and yeah, I saw those benefits, and still going.
Awesome. So has it turned around your type 1 diabetes?
No, and I have heard of others, other type 1 diabetics who, their insulin requirements are basically nothing now, which I guess would make them not type 1 diabetic. But, unfortunately, for the vast majority of type 1 diabetics, the collateral damage is already done. The cells are either sequestered off or dead, and so they don't make insulin anymore. So, but it's not to say that we won't ever find, a solution to that. But for the vast majority of them, that's the case. Now, there are a lot of instances, anecdotes that I've heard, and also some published case studies of with kids where if they intervene soon enough after diagnosis of type 1, that they can reverse the process. And the group out of Hungary, Paleomedicina, has published a few cases on this. So early intervention seems to be key there, at least in those instances. So my insulin requirements are way lower than they've ever been. And so that to me is a huge success, and might as well be a cure in my eyes,
Yeah, it sounds like that you have changed it or turned it around quite a bit, even if it wasn't completely taken care of. But yeah, it seems like a cure for you, right?
Yeah. At least I know it's helping prevent all the complications from type 1 diabetes down the road, or delay them, or whatever, whatever's going to give me more health long term. And so that's definitely enough for me.
Yeah. So have you noticed other benefits from going to a meat-based diet? I mean, did you have anything else going on in your body that changed?
Well, it's the best my digestion's been my entire life. That's something I've always dealt with. I mean, autoimmune inflammation type history, the digestion and the gut health was always less than optimal, I'd say. And so this is the best it's ever been. I actually feel like I have no GI symptoms whatsoever for the first time that I can remember. And then the other benefits to me is I wrote a book called The Health Evolution, and it's really a big picture explanation of why humans have chronic disease in general, whatever that disease may be. But it also connects human health to the health of the planet. So I really care about the planet, and this type of diet allows me to very easily get all my food from a regenerative agriculture farm less than an hour from my house. And that is a huge benefit to me, or personally to me, because that's something I really care about. And this is, it's really helped me achieve those goals, whereas if I was eating, say half my diet of plants, like most of those plants, and trying to get all the nutrients I need from those plants, most of those plants would have to come from much further away. And it's harder to find, sustainably raised versions of those plants. And so that's just, something that personally I think it's been a huge benefit for me.
Yeah. So can you give me an idea of what you typically eat in a day?
Yeah. So I eat usually twice a day. Sometimes I don't intermittent fast. Sometimes I'll eat something in the morning. But usually I'll have, like, for lunch, I'll eat around like noon. And I'll have either like a can of sardines or some ground beef or something. And then I'll have bone broth, like a big thermos of bone broth with, and it also has some meat in it as well. I cook some meat with the broth, and that's kind of like my small little lunch. And then dinner is my bigger meal. And with that, I'll have lots of different variations of things. Sometimes I'll have a steak. Sometimes I'll have, some pork. Sometimes I'll have eggs, liver. I don't know. Sometimes I'll do some cheese, but I don't do much dairy. Yeah, and then water, and salt, and that's pretty much what I do. I'd say that, and it's been almost 2 years now, and there have been a few different times where I had like an avocado or something, and that's usually on vacation, when I couldn't find everything that I wanted. Um, but yeah, that's what I eat pretty much every day. I'm trying to think if there's any other
Oh
things,
yeah.
but that's pretty
Well, it
much it.
sounds good. I don't know if you eat fish. Do you eat fish?
Just the sardines.
Sardines only? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So does your family eat the same type of diet or do they not?
Well, right now I'm pretty much on my own. My wife is actually living and working in England, but she'll be home very soon. She'll be home in January, so that's good. Um, so it's pretty much just me right now, and the cats are full carnivores too.
That,
So, but that's definitely their species appropriate diet, even more so I think than ours. Um, but my I mean, like my parents have started eating much more along these lines, and they've seen huge benefits. And my wife definitely eats a lot of animals. She's from she grew up on a farm, and she understands like they had lots of animals growing up, so they ate the whole animal and all this kind of stuff. And so she definitely eats this way, but she still eats plants. Um, and so when she gets back in January, there'll be more plants in my fridge, but not for me, for her.
yeah. Well, that sounds great. Can you tell people how to contact you or get in touch with you if they wanted to find out more of what you help people with?
Yeah. So my website is resourceyourhealth.com. And my blog is on there, and I blog a lot about heart disease because that's what I'm really focused on preventing in myself, and I share that information. I also do some online health coaching, and I run that through that website too. And then I'm also on social media. It's Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. It's Dr. Stephen Hussey, Dr. Stephen Hussey. And they can reach out to me there if they want. And I post information there semi-frequently, so people can find me there.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I appreciate you coming to our show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Okay. We'll see you soon.
All right, see you.
Bye bye.
Bye.